Note, Bhavna, I'm going to hand over the proceedings to you. Over to you then.
Thank you, Kavya. Thank you for setting this up for us. And thank you for, I think Nikhil's not in the room right now, but he's done some post work as well, because he did touch upon the fact of nano attention, which we were just talking about micro. So from as like SIMs, which have gone from micro SIM to nano SIM, we are also talking about micro boredom to moving to nano attention. So I have here a very, very exciting panel with me. We have two super content providers sitting on my either side. We have somebody who's a fellow marketer like me, and we have two people here who are actually have the experience of working across most of us and most of our brands across the board. So without further ado, I will start with you, Gulshan and Binda, and from your perspective, talking about micro boredom and how actually people end up looking at their screens every fleeting second. How do you guys do the difficult task of keeping the attention of people and trying to hold their attention with long format shows or with other kind of content? So either of you can go first.
Hello. Yeah. So we are in the business of entertainment, and our product that we sell is content itself. So the whole thing about, just to put in context, as Red Chillies, we make movies for theatrical release. Also, we create content for OTT platforms. So, the challenge is, since the product itself is content, how do we generate, more conversations around it? Typically, there are three phases that we look at. First is awareness, where people get to know about, the new show or movie that's coming out. Second is the acquisition phase, when they decide to buy the ticket. And third is advocacy, which is very critical for entertainment category per se. Now, when I'm looking at what I'm competing with, of course, I'm competing with television, other movies coming around, around the same time. But most importantly, actually, what I am competing with is what a person will do over a weekend, right? The option is, of course, to go for a movie, or you can go out and have a dinner. It's about, taking out your family or, with someone else. You're going out for a movie, and it's actually investment of 3 to 4 hours of your time. So in that time, the competition grows much, much bigger, and there is such a huge clutter. Today, if you look at, any of the outdoors across the city, you will see quite a bit of it is on some form of content or the other. So the whole task of catching attention, in this cluttered market, is the challenge itself. We've dabbled across many things, making short format content, but the challenge is not about creating short format content at all. If people are hooked on, they are okay to invest and watch longer content even. I mean, I'm talking about promotional content. If you look at the way we behave, throughout the day, we're consuming different type of content from 1 second to 30 second throughout the day. But later in the night, we are ready to invest a bit more time. So depending on the time of the day, our promotional content strategy also keeps changing. And also, the people have to be in the right frame of mind, depending on the marketing intent. How do we deliver that content? That has been the biggest challenge, and I think we'll talk more about it.
So I think on Hotstar, we reach about 300 million people a month now. So we end up doing 2 or 3 different things, to attract the user. I think the first one is mass personalization. So there are these we have languages, we have sports, we have entertainment, now we have news. So personalizing that is very quick and easy for us, and being able to do that without the user doing anything is a pretty important thing. I think we still think about tentpoles. So for example, we launched Avengers Endgame today, is now available on Hotstar, so that's like a big deal, so people make time and appointment for that. The question becomes, what comes next, or, and what happens? And so I'll give you an example from sports. So if you look at our curve on sports, which is we measure in terms of number of viewers per second, and I think we've hit a world record. I think we hit 25.3 million watching at any one point in time for the India-Pakistan game. That spikes up and spikes down by 5 million in a matter of 3 minutes. And part of it is what's happening around the street, part of it's the notifications we sent. It's all, we end up scaling and building up the ability to send hundreds of notifications, 100 messages. What you see is kind of personalized to you. Languages is in there as well, so that becomes a piece. I mean, how we work with brands, for example, is like, for example, Coke has been a partner for us on both the IPL and World Cup, and they want to be there for some certain magic moments. So we kind of plan, somebody's going to get out, somebody's going to score a 6, you have integrations like a sharing of a drink or emoticon. All those things allow us to basically take the activity and decide when to happen. And that takes a bit of manual effort right now. The big thing I end up thinking about, sorry, is anyone ringing a bell? Okay, all right. So part of it is about preparation. There are these moments, and when people are bored, when people have time to like socialize. It's really interesting. And then we have these other signals. So for example, we have social. We just announced something called Hot Shots where you can send up selfies. We're doing video duets. All those are basically allow us to understand when people are interested. And it's just frankly about planning all the way through in terms of this. So we have long form content. We partner very much with Red Chilies as well. But we also have a lot of short form content. But actually, even within long form content, there are things that matter. We just did a launch on Star Plus and Hotstar for a show, and we did the usual thing. We looked at different thematics, campaigns. We looked at which characters are trending, and we up and move those down on a sort of microseconds right now. And that show within a week went from number 11 to number 3 in about, actually in a week. So those things can happen, and it's just really what's about driving that activity.
Great. Durga, you've been, your brand's been at the cutting edge of actually trying to tap into the whole moment marketing piece. So moment marketing is one, but, in terms of Boredom, how do you actually leverage your moment marketing to get onto the consumer pulse?
Yeah, so I guess, we didn't call it any of these things. So later when we were talking about it, in that context, it seemed interesting to connect this grammar to what we were trying to do. But I think largely the opportunity we see is twofold, right? I think some verticals have started maturing in India. I think food and travel could be two such verticals where before, after, during, there's a lot of potential for content discovery, content consumption, and therefore, I think it sort of gives us this opportunity as vertical players to say, what will we do with attention during, meaning as users start to think about transacting or after transacting, while they wait for their food to arrive, right? So there were a couple of points where we felt that content could play a very big part in cuisine discovery, dish discovery, restaurant discovery, right? So it was very discovery focused. And we also tried to, I think someone was talking in the earlier panel, experiment with a range of emotions, right? So whether it's, somebody like Sumuki writing rage comedy around food, or it's someone like, a celebrity telling us about what they want to eat, I think we needed to use different parameters to measure what users would respond to, right? And I think it's still very early days, but the results have been interesting, where for us, unlike perhaps Gulshan in the larger sense, it's less about acquisition and very much more about trying to figure out if video and content can play a very substantial role within the commerce ecosystem. And I think it's still very early days for us in that journey.
Thank you, Durga. And coming to this side, considering that both of you have a very, very wide experience across brands and across various various kind of brand objectives. So what do you think in your terms and from your perspective is the kind of rules a brand needs to follow while they want to do the best they can on this whole tackling the micro-boredom fatigue, which is kind of setting in?
So as someone who partners with our clients, we've seen a distinct shift in the kind of briefs that are coming our way and also in our thinking. Some years ago, it was TV content that got placed on digital, and for a lot of the not so mature brands, that was the strategy. But as you see, when you see Snapchat coming in, there's Instagram stories, Facebook stories. It's in line with the way the consumers are behaving. Just flipping through content, picking up the phone. Somebody who's bored of this discussion will probably pick up the phone and start looking at their stories. How do we capture their interest? How do we capture their attention? So the approach that we are adopting and advising our clients more and more is definitely to look at tentpole ideas, but not look at just, say, once a quarter kind of an approach, but to have a lot more ideas on the table, more campaigns that you would normally have to be able to intercept such moments and gain sort of a greater share of their attention. So imagine it to be like a thali with lots of little unique pieces of content, but all adding up to the larger idea. And through the year, lots of different thalis that you're serving your audience to pick and choose from. So that's one approach that we have been taking and following to be able to address this case issue, not an issue, an opportunity of micro-boredom, so to say. The other is, interestingly, what you spoke about is, earlier there used to be this golden hour that we used to target, right? It's no longer there. To some degree, perhaps, it was an interesting sort of contrast. There's the binge-watching behavior, where you don't want any distractions and you'll continue watching, perhaps at night. May vary for different audiences. But on the other hand, there is when you're switching content platforms so easily and so fast. So how do you address both of those kind of distinct polarized behaviors as well that we are looking at? But at the heart of it, when you look at all of this, it's storytelling and what we are saying, right? Long format, short format, really doesn't matter as long as you've got the right story content or the emotion captured in it. You'll watch long format content if you're interested in it, if it catches your attention. But you may not watch it, you'd prefer short format content perhaps in a stories because that's what it gives, that's the offering over there. And there we're starting to look at sort of a 10-second video or an 8-second piece of content where you don't have the luxury of, the traditional start with a bang, then go up and then end with a sort of a heightened sense over there. So even from a creative product and output point of view, we have to adapt in both ways, both for long format and short format, to address both kinds of distinct behaviors, but at the heart of it, the essence of storytelling still remains the same. So these are sort of the three things, so to say, that we are adopting to adapt to this phenomena that we have noticed in the market.
Cool. So I also wanted to address the advertising and marketing side of it, right? Of course, content is where, there is rich content that's being created, which is, 10 seconds or 30-second content. But even from an advertiser standpoint, advertising is also becoming more, you can say in a sense, more native, right? Users have very less attention span towards even advertising. So what is important and what we tell marketers is to be very clear in terms of communication that they want to kind of communicate, right? Storytelling, of course, you can tell a story in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but how to crunch that story or the advertising piece into a 10-second is a different skill set. What we've also seen is that a user takes a decision on an advertising within the first 3 seconds. So even if you have a 10-second video, even that is actually quite a lit, because within 3 seconds, he's deciding whether he wants to interact with the ad or he wants to completely skip that. So clarity of communication, what you're communicating, has to happen in the first 3 seconds. That's super important. Secondly, marketers need to also realize each platform and recognize that each platform is, different and unique, right? We very often say Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and as if they are one platform. But honestly, users are coming to each of these platforms for different things. Sometimes they're, creating content. Sometimes they're consuming content. They're creating content of different type. They may be, creating content on video, or they're just adding to an endless scroll and updating their status, etc. Right? So the user is in a different, he's come for a different objective on each of those platforms, and you need to address or reach out to him in a very short span accordingly, right? So 2 important things: how you communicate and what clarity by what you communicate, and also recognizing each platform is different and then attacking those users in that format.
Great, thank you both. I think that's really helpful, and it kind of tells us both sides of how an agency and a publisher would kind of look at these things. And especially we as marketers, when we're giving those briefs, we need to be careful about these things. So one question I'll just go around the panel for that, is that how do you think this whole concept of micro-boredom is actually redefining the consumer journeys from, let's say, when maybe 15 years ago, considering that this term has actually first time come in 2007, before a lot of the content which we are talking about right now wasn't even there. So it's not that the consumer behavior has taken such a big change since then. So it was there, but again, I know that there's a difference in how we are planning our consumer journeys now. So if you can just kind of starting with you, Durga.
Yeah, so I think I'd sort of redefine it as micro-attention rather than micro-boredom. I think in several ways we've all learned to adapt storytelling to very native small formats, right? Whether that might be in seconds or minutes or the traditional episodic journey, right? But I think what that has also pushed us to do is, I think brands no more will only use traditional advertising, right, to tell their brand story or to reach out to very discrete as well as overlapping consumer bases. So I think your whole meaning of your brand has, in a sense, become more defined by the consumer rather than only your marketing department, especially for a very emotional brand like food. Like it really, the ways in which it's interpreted, some of it we have control over, some of it we totally don't have control over. So our storytelling has become both of the moment as well as planned. I think the second huge revelation, at least for me, and perhaps I'm new to this, is the power of a script and what it can do. I think until we got into thinking about content and actually breaking scripts down and looking at genres, the versatility of interpreting food on Zomato, I think through content, is far more interesting than just selling it as advertising, right? So I think that has been a phenomenal sort of journey for me to understand how I can associate food in the user's mind and thereby Zomato as well.
So I think there was a statement someone said, which on this panel, which I didn't agree with, so I thought I'd bring it up. Someone says people have no attention, and then 3 seconds, actually you did it, so you and I are old friends, so we can get away with it. I actually don't believe that. So, we have people who watch for 43 minutes a day on average. They come and they watch 50 minutes, an hour, they'll sit through this. And I think my view is that if you make me watch something I'm not interested in, my attention span is 1 second. If you make me engage with something as a consumer, which is native to what I'm doing, I'll take, Snapchat, I'll take the others, where it's a story or where it's a filter or something, I can probably spend hours on it. Okay, so we spend a lot of time, and not with one, but multiple stories. So I don't buy the point that there's this micro boredom and you need to push the message down. I think that's driven by certain platforms, where the use case is I will flip through 50 different stories in like an hour. I think there's a statement that says, in some cases that makes sense, but it's not sense for everybody. I have brands that work with us that I'll give you an example. IPL is one thing, but even so, we did a partnership with the Birla Group. And they put a biography down of one of the founders. It was his anniversary. And we just put it out there. It was a biography. It was fairly, not that we had a lot of thought behind it. It was our number 3 ranked reality documentary within a week. Okay? And it was, I would say, at least 30 minutes, maybe between 30 minutes and an hour. So, and, for the brand, it was a big deal. People coming and watching the number 3 ranked on Hotstar, watching an hour, learning about the history and the stature and the story behind ABG is a fairly interesting conversation. And that may be a good fit for us. I think the difference, what you're talking about, Bhavna, is that I have many more options now. I used to have one TV, one newspaper, if that, and that was it. Now we're actually saying that if I'm bored, I will flip between 15 other things. And so I actually I kind of agree with what the guy is saying, which is it's not micro boredom, it's micro options. And I can jump between any of those, and I can sometimes do both at the same time.
Great. Gulshan?
So the marketing life cycle hasn't changed, but the way we engage with the customer, the consumers has drastically changed in the last few years. In movie marketing, of course, the biggest thing is the trailer which we release. And then there are songs which come out, and the final leg is when you are inviting people to come and watch the movie. So the phases remain same, but what we've realized, because there is so much clutter, and just to catch the attention, we actually have started working very closely with lots of content creators, brand partners, making interesting content which is relevant to their life, and putting it across to them, when they are in the right frame of mind to consume it. So typically when we put out a trailer, you get a lot of understanding that this consumer set, what are their other interest area. So suppose you figure out food is a big passion area for them, pets is a big or a passion area, or home craft is a big thing. So, we will actually talk to content creators in those relevant spaces or brands and make interesting content along with them and take it to them. So that's another way of, continuously engaging with the consumers. Like we tried another thing for our movie Zero. We created this Twitter handle for Baua Singh, who was the lead character for the movie. It had 262,000 followers in a 70-day campaign. And Baua Singh was a boy from Meerut, and he used to have a point of view on everything that's happening around the world, maybe other than politics. We stayed away from that. So, those form of engagement really helps, other than, of course, because the product is content itself, people the biggest asset is the trailer. But after that, how do you keep engaging with them? And again, when the tickets are being sold, we will partner with traditionally a Book My Show, Paytm, Amazon Pay, and make it easier for them to decide to book a ticket. Even we do geo-targeted campaigns. Like suppose you're walking across in a mall which has a PVR. You will be told about a show that's coming up, and if we are partnering with someone, one of the payment platforms, if there is an offer, you can book a ticket and walk in right there. So I think those form of micro engagements have increased a lot more.
Yeah, so I think when I was talking about the micro boredom and just countering you, it was the second point which I was saying, recognizing each platform, right? I'm not saying that movies are going to die and, people are not going to see movies, or they're not going to see long, content and long format content. They're going to simultaneously exist. But, what Boredom is all about is that there are platforms and there are times probably of the day when a user kind of skips through a lot. So even on Snapchat, for example, the users are spending 30 minutes plus time on the platform, right? So it's not that they don't come on the platform, they come often, but they come multiple times of the day, during the day, and they skip through content, see content, etc., and get out, right? So I'm not saying long content is dying and dead, but yeah, they're both there to stay.
Okay, in terms of the consumer journey, it is complicated. Everybody is aware of that. There are just too many options. I think the trick to winning in that journey is how well you know your audience. And that, again, is, easier said than done, right? It's expanding the journey. It's no longer awareness, interest, desire, and action. It's how much can you expand it? And it's a fairly elastic journey. And how many of those sort of micro moments can you anticipate and deliver? I think that's sort of where we are headed, at least. All right?
So I see the red board is flashing back at us. And I think we'll have to now close down the panel. We'll take the questions offline. But just to sum up, after whatever I've listened to this, and we hadn't really rehearsed any of it before we came in here, it's actually going back to the 4 Ps of marketing, which every person in the room has really followed, because you have to have the 4 Ps right along with the right planning. And that's really where it all boils down to, because consumers, though the way of consuming media would change, but they at the core of their being are still the same people, and they're like all of us. So on that note, I would like to thank you, all my fellow panelists and the audiences. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Bhavna. Thank you, all of our panelists as well. We're going to request you to please come together for a